instructions, or just okay, we're going to do it, but we're going to try it this way.
All right, so I think we'll get started. If are you all set? You're perfect. Okay, great. Thanks all of you for coming today. It's nice to see some familiar faces and some people I haven't met yet. So we are up and coming teachers. There's a number of us in the room: Nikki, Becky, Amanda, Ethan, and another of our members, Tom, will be showing up later. So again, thank you. And we're going to be having 2 workshops in this room, and then we're going to move downstairs for the panel. I put the schedule up here so that you know what's going on. But just so you know, it's two in here. That's why we got the food in here, and then downstairs is 100E for our panel discussion. So they'll be showing up around 3. So I am very excited to talk about this topic. And it kind of takes 2 modalities I've used a lot, and put them together. So place-based education and social justice education. And I haven't talked about them explicitly, but the last few months I've been thinking really hard about these. So here's the objectives today. So participants will be able to define place-based education and social justice education, make connections between them, identify ways in which these 2 teaching modalities have been used together around the nation. That's the first objective. And then participants will be able to determine ways in which they can employ these modalities in their local classrooms, schools, and communities. So that's what I hope you get out of this workshop today. Afterwards, you'll be able to tell me whether or not this is right. So it's just like teaching a lesson in your school. You're like, well, I hope this works. So, all right. Just want to give you an agenda so you know where we're going. I'm going to do those definitions, have you guys do a little discussion, discuss connections. I'm going to give you a bunch of examples of the integration the things that can happen when you put place-based education together with social justice education. I've got some examples from my own practice. I've got some examples from around the nation. Then we're going to discuss some local issues and projects and kind of do a little bit of a short brainstorm. Then I'm going to propose a new model for large schools, and I'll get to why I'm proposing it for large schools when I get there. And then finally, I'm hoping to have some time to do a little bit of project planning of our own using that green sheet. So that's the agenda for today. Okay, so if you look at your white sheet on the back where it has the definitions, it'll say, yeah, place-based education at the top. Let me grab one for myself. So I wanted to include these definitions because, both so you know where I'm coming from, and also because everybody means something different when they say place-based education. Everyone means something different when they say social justice education. So you can see where I'm coming from, at least for the purposes of this workshop. Here's the deal. So place-based education for me is about immersing students in their local environment first, and in addition to learning about domestic issues, international issues. The idea is that if you know your community, then you can apply what you know to any other community that you are a part of. So, for example, every community has to deal with the issue of water, right? So, and when we were in Guatemala, I taught in Guatemala, took students to Guatemala for a little bit. They had enormous issues with water. Their water table was dropping in certain places. They're having problems with what's potable, what's not. There was poisoning happening because there's arsenic in the water. I also have visited Norway. They have an abundant amount of water. They have like infinite water. They don't worry about water at all. But they do have to figure out how to get it to every household. And then in parts of India, entire communities are dying because they don't have access to any water. So water is important in any community. If you know how your community treats water, if you know that water is an important part of a community, then you can understand it a little bit better. So that's part of the idea of place-based education. It's the idea that we have to understand our local environment in order to understand the wider environment. It includes project-based learning. So more than just sitting in the 4 walls of your classroom, but actually going out into the community. Social justice education, if you look down, this is a great list from Rethinking Schools, and if you've taken the cultural diversity class, you've seen this list. It's a really good one. It's about connecting the students' lives. It's about understanding power, about understanding oppression, understanding race, homophobia, sexism, but also being activists. So those are my definitions. And I want to look at some of the benefits of place-based education because it's not something we hear about that often. It's kind of started out as a New England thing, and that's how I know about it because I worked in Maine. But this is it's a composite of all the research that's been done on place-based education, and this is what they found. On the resource at the middle of the page there, it says promiseofplace.org. That same sheet, you can find all these articles. Okay, so and the composite of these is these results. So as I've, and I'm not going to read these off, I just let you read them, but as I've done place-based education myself, I can say that these are absolutely true, and it's really profound how this happens. I'll explain a little bit about that as we go on. So that's it, and I also wanted you to take a look at, this is one piece from the Maine Department of Education. Just want to give you a few seconds to read this. This is one research report based off a student survey. So that's self-reported from students, so obviously more research is needed, and I'm continuing to fund more research into this to see how this can address things like the achievement gap, how it can address, how can you be academically rigorous and do project-based education. It's actually really easy, but we do, try to do research into that aspect of place-based education, so it's ongoing. This is how I think about it, because I want to turn now to a little bit about social justice education. We've looked at the benefits of place-based education, and I want to talk a little bit about where I'd like to personally like to take social justice education. And through, I think the way to bring social justice education from this end of the arrow to that end is through place-based education. So I think that social justice educators, the ones that I knew they do a great job of building classroom community. They do a great job of choosing their curriculum, right? They choose to teach about labor history. They choose to spend a good amount of time on the civil rights movement. They choose to talk about power. They choose to talk about things that really impact their students' lives. That's great. That's incredibly important. You have to start there. That's a huge part of it, to build classroom community. As you move on, though, I think that social justice education can continue past that point, all the way to enhancing local and global communities. And I think the way to do that is through the tenets of place-based education, through the model of place-based education. It gets students out into the community, into their local communities, and it helps them to become more active citizens, it helps them to be more engaged, and it makes connections between students and adults, which right now in our society we don't have a lot of. So where I come from, at least for the purpose of this workshop and in my own teaching philosophy, is that adolescents especially, but students in general in our society, don't really have a role except for that of receivers, right? So and it's not their fault. We give them education, we give them resources, we give them money and shelter and food. They don't have a chance, they don't have a formal chance to give back to the community. I think it creates a lot of frustration, creates a lot of teen angst, right? Creates a lot of other things. And I think that the more we can pair adolescents and students of any age, but especially adolescents, with adults, the more we can bring adolescents out into the community, I think the more we're going to see, I think, positive societal changes. In most communities, adolescents, 13-year-olds, are considered adults in many cultures around the world, and they have more connection with adults. In our society, we put them in the same age groups, and we keep them there until really they're, 25, 22 when they get out of college. So it's a really different model of running a society, and I think that the great thing about using social justice, using place-based education, is that you bring students out and they connect with adults, and students at any age, but especially adolescents, need connections with people who are not their parents and who are not their teachers. They really do, and I think there's a lot of problems that can be solved that way. So that's my little soapbox. I'm done with that now. And I'd like you to, we've gone through this pretty quick, but you've got definitions on that sheet in front of you. We've gotten a chance to see a little bit of the research, talk a little bit about the major concepts of this workshop: social justice education, place-based education. Take a minute. Just like you to pair up with someone next to you, or if there needs to be groups of 3, absolutely, that's fine. We want you to know what are some of the connections between place-based education and social justice education. What are some of the ways they overlap? Talk about that for about